Time for Fine Tailored Suits, brought to you by Quality Tire. 10 locations across Saskatchewan. QualityTire.ca. He is Riders great. Glenn Suter, what is up? You're in the draft afterglow?
Yeah, that's what exactly. Breaking down the draft, taking a look at a lot of these players and getting ready to prepare for them, hopefully come August when we can kick it off and see some of these guys on the field.
Fingers crossed on that one. You know what we should do right at the top, Zinger? Do you have Death by Trivia ready to go?
Let's do this.
All right, we're giving away, in honor of Mother's Day, an exclusive Saskatchewan Roughriders Hilberg and Burke white sparkle ball necklace.
All right, here we go. Today's question is, Glenn Suter made his Grey Cup debut in the broadcast booth in 2008. A famous speech was made before the game by this head coach. And, quote, "We got him right where we want him." Who was that head coach who gave that speech to the team before that Grey Cup game? Text me up or call me up, 306-936-6262 or toll-free 866-767-0620.
Who was that coach?
That was your first Grey Cup, was 08 with TSN?
Yeah, that was our first for TSN, and that was my first as the color analyst. I did a couple with CBC as a sideline reporter prior to that, but to actually get up and be in the booth with Chris was 2008. That was the first one.
What was the mustache situation in 08? Was it like full luxurious? I don't remember when it left us, but what was the mustache situation in 08?
It left us when my wife said, you kind of remind me of Ron Burgundy.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
I said, okay, have you seen my leather-bound books?
Yeah, exactly. Rich mahogany and leather-bound books. Outstanding. All right, Suits, let's dive into the draft. The Riders get Nelson Lacombo at 2. They get the first receiver off the board, the first true wide receiver off the board, Terrell Jana of Virginia at 17. Bruno LaBelle, the tight end from Cincinnati via Montreal at 20. What did you make of the Riders draft?
Well, I like it. I think every team is right now today saying, hey, I like what we did. I like our guys. I heard Jeremy O'Day talk about his list and how they pretty much got the guys they were targeting. And that's always flexible, and you always have to be ready to move and change your strategy as it goes on, because you don't know who's picking or what they'll do before you. But yeah, I thought it was good. I mean, Nelson Lacombo can play a lot of different positions. I think that's really important. You take a look at the athletes across the board, bigger, stronger, faster everywhere. So they're all good athletes. So the one trend I noticed, which I think is important to bring up, is this, that the athletes coming out of youth sports are getting better every single year. Bigger, stronger, faster, football IQs through the roof. And I like what Jeremy O'Day said about Nelson Lacombo, and it jumped out to me. It was not about his 40 time or his bench press or those kind of things. It was about his interview, and that he is a high character guy from the U of S, knows the Rider culture, and is going to go in there with this great appreciation and respect for the game, respect for the league, and step in, try to make the team first, and then really contribute and build his career. I'd seen that in Montreal with Danny Machocha. Took a couple Francophone kids out of the University of Montreal right out of the gate because he's coached them. He knows them. It's home. They've watched as kids the Alouettes. Lacombo's watched the Riders as a kid. So it makes a lot of sense. I love the first pick. The first 3 picks, and we can talk about Bruno because the first pick overall being Jake Burt was interesting too.
Yeah, we'll dive into that. We were talking a little bit about tight ends earlier. I want to ask you on Lacombo. Of course, his brother has played in the CFL for a few years. Does something like that carry extra weight with front offices going, oh, his brother plays football, he probably has an idea of what's to come? Does that carry any weight when it comes to selecting players, do you think?
Sure. I mean, it's all part of the puzzle, right? It's all part of the pie-shaped graph that you're working on. First there's measurables, and you look at that. That's a piece of that pie. And then you look at that interview process, the character, the family, the motivation level. Is he really disappointed because something didn't work out in another league for him? So now he's coming to camp in a real different mindset that you would hope for. I didn't see that in any of that. And then if you have sort of a family tree where your brother or someone, maybe your father has played in the league and you've watched it from that perspective, yeah, I think that all helps. That's all part of it. A real good pick. Sounds like a good hard-nosed player. Isn't afraid to get his nose dirty and get down close to the box and, play maybe even that Sam position. You play 2 or even maybe 3 in the secondary in different sets. It gives you lots of flexibility on defense.
Well, and that's one of the things, Mitchell, is J.O. talked about it, and we've seen it play out. Just the ability to use Canadians in a bunch of spots now is great.
Yeah, and the fact that he has that versatility, that he can play corner, half, or safety. I know Glenn just talked about maybe dropping him down into a linebacker position. I would have to think right now when I look at the roster, if Lacombo does enough to impress the coaching staff that he could start, do you start him at half and move Purifoy down to linebacker? Because you talk about the ratio flexibility.
Sam's a cover spot, right? Suits by this time,
yep.
We really run six up and 6 back. Like Sam linebacker, that's a coverage spot because that guy's got to run to the field and help out in this case. What would have been in 19 Purifoy and LJ McCray.
Yeah, you've got to be able to play the run, and you've got to be able to, like I said, step in and take a gap on the run game. But it sounds like that's just no problem for Nelson Lacombo. So when you have that mentality, then you have a guy that's not afraid to do it. He's not going to sit and dance.
Yeah,
he's gonna beat the guard that's coming around and try and pull and make the block on him. He's going to beat him with his quickness, and then he's going to go hit Andrew Harris right in the mouth and stop him. And so if he can do that, and Purifoy and him can rotate, and then you bring the safety down, and then he can play deep outside third. I mean, Winnipeg has done this a lot too, and they use Adam Bighill sometimes to rotate him back to the safety spot, and sometimes play 2 safeties and 2 high, cover 2 look.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't know which guy's going to drop, which guy's going to blitz. Jeremy O'Day mentioned he's a good blitzer as well off the edge. So that puts him up at the line of scrimmage at the halfback spot. I don't think he'd be probably not ready for at least a couple of years to be a full-time short side halfback. I mean, that's a very, very difficult, probably the toughest position to play in football in the secondary is that short side halfback spot. But if you can rotate in there, not be in a bad mismatch situation to hang in there for a few downs and then slide to the Sam or slide to the safety spot as the ball's being snapped, boy, it makes it tough to play against.
Yeah, maybe the most important part is now with Lacombo and the other defensive back the Riders took in the draft, they have 4 Canadians who you look at and go, those guys are probably outside defensive backs as opposed to just safety. And I don't mean to say just safeties, as opposed to safeties where Mike Edom and company hang out. 4 guys who could potentially play that field corner is the position that J.O. talks about. And you go, okay, well, if you had 2 defensive backs and you had a tackle and you had 3 linemen, you could also go 2 receivers who are Canadian. Brett Boyko could also play left tackle.
Oh, I forgot about Brett Boyko.
You could, when you need to get to 7+3 national players, you could, not inconceivable, you wouldn't do it, but you could do it with 10 Canadians. That's a fantastic bit of flexibility for coaches and for the roster when it comes to picking who's going to be on game day. And if you have an injury, how do you accommodate for that? Oh, well, no problem, because we got 3 other guys that could be our 7th Canadian. I love what they've done.
Yeah, 2 of the best coaches in the game's history, the late Don Matthews and Wally Buono, both did that throughout their career. They would have the flexibility to play 10 different positions or 10 different Canadians and rotate them through. So, you play with your 7 but you can change that ratio and play 2 more on offense and take 2 and change them on defense. What it does more than anything is it helps you adjust throughout the season when you get guys nicked. A guy gets nicked, you can just, move a Canadian to halfback for a game. And then if you can do that, or move a Canadian O lineman to tackle when you lose your starting left tackle, and he holds his own for a couple of games, maybe even plays real well there and gives you even more options. So, I think the Canadian talent is just getting so much better every single year. It starts to, you start to think that these guys can play in year one. And, for a long time, that really wasn't the case. That didn't happen very often where a Canadian draft pick started in year one. Ray Elgaard didn't.
Yeah.
It's great Canadian players took a little longer because, for generally speaking, they started football later in life. Most of them in high school or even beyond high school, and went to college and decided to play football in college. So they played 4 years and then get drafted. That was kind of the old way 20 years ago. Now they're training bigger, stronger, faster, and ready to play almost in year one.
I love it. This draft, we had a tight end go number 1 overall. You mentioned Jake Burt. The Riders took Bruno Labelle at 20. 2 years ago, the Ticats took Nikola Kalinic at 10th overall. Big, ginormous tight end type receivers. I'm curious to get Suit's take on, is that going to become a thing? Is this just we're having these athletes at this time right now? Is this the future? And how could you efficiently use a guy who's 6'5" and 250 in a CFL offense? That's coming up on the Cage as we continue with Glenn Suitor in fine tailored suits. 620 CKRM. Congratulations to Bert. That is a beautiful necklace on your way just in time for Mother's Day. First overall, as we continue with Glenn Suitor, the Hamilton Tiger Cats took Jake Burt from Boston College, listed 6'3", 260 pounds, tight end. 20th overall, the Riders select from Cincinnati Bruno Labelle, listed 6'4", 250 pounds. In 2019, the Ticats took Nikola Kalinic 10th overall, 6'5", 255 pounds. Suits, compared to the run-of-the-mill CFL receiver, these are enormous men.
Big boys. Oh. But, I like the draft pick. First of all, it was great to watch Jake Burt get picked up and in the first pick overall, and the way he reacted was outstanding. And it's what we talked about on Monday, DT, when, we talked about those who might suggest that it's not the dream of a kid to be drafted into the CFL. It's the dream of a kid to play pro football. Mm-hmm. And if it's one league or the other, obviously you win the lottery if you get drafted in the other league, but in the NFL. But if you're drafting the CFL, that feeling is exactly the same. It's less money, but it's exactly the same. And I love the response from Jake Burt and his family and his agent. Coach O basically called him about 5 minutes before he actually made the announcement of the draft pick. And it's on YouTube somewhere, but he basically told him, hey, we're drafting you. And they just jumped up and down and celebrated. I remember what that felt like. And, I felt really good for him. I mean, here's a kid that totally respects the game. He respects the league. He loves it. He can't wait to get to Canada. He's got family in Saskatchewan and across Canada and different places. And, I just love that reaction. So now you got a big kid that's athletic and can run. And, I'm going to bring up a couple of names from the past. And I'm going to go way back here now. I think you guys actually touched on it, which is good. I went, hey, nice. I don't know who said it, but it was Harry Holt and Ricky Ellis back in the BC days with Vic Rapp as their coach. Jerry Taggy was their quarterback. At times back then, they would go double tight formations, but you can use the Canadian Football League motion rules to your advantage here. Mm-hmm. Now, if you go to more recent times, Ray Elgaard comes to mind. Rocky DiPietro, who I played against in Hamilton, was a big body. Maybe not 250, but it was a big body. So if Labelle can run, and presumably he can, now you've got the motion rules to work with your advantage. If you're that big in the NFL, you can only go laterally along the line of scrimmage in motion. The snap of the ball, you turn, and then you can get downfield speed. But in the CFL, as you know, the waggle gives you a 5-10 yard run to the line of scrimmage before the snap of the ball. If you get good at that, you can be a big body and be 1,000-yard receiver if you can, run adequately. And of course, Jake can, and so can, and Bruno. So, it's a different type of technique. It's a different way to get open. But I remember Ray Elgard would just slap DBs in the side of the head.
Yep.
You'd go flying.
Yeah.
I mean, every single training camp I played, this is a little side note, but every training camp I went to for I think the first 3 years of my career against Elgard, he would practice for the first 4 or 5 days. Then he'd take a couple of vet days, and then and he'd come back later. So in the first couple of days, I would always get into a scuffle with Elgard. Now these fights, these fights that he and I would have were very quick. They were where he grabbed me, ragdolled me, threw me to the ground. But, I'd be feisty and, be pushing back and getting up swinging and all that stuff. So it was always to show the coach that the biggest receiver you guys got, I'm going to take him on. And I wanted to just make a point early. But Elgard was a beast to cover because he'd take that downhill motion. He'd get onto your body as a defensive back trying to cover him. He'd just give you a little lean or a push or a slap, get you off balance, turn around, find the holes in the zones, and could get in behind you. I mean, remember his touchdown in '89 and that corner route got in behind the Hamilton defense. So, and I know he was smaller than LaBelle, but this is the type of body type that can be really effective in a different way in the Canadian Football League.
After hearing that story, Suits, I now know where the pre-show ritual between DT and Zinger comes from.
the slapping? What are we talking
Well,
about?
the ragdolling.
Oh, the rag. Yeah.
Where Zinger just ragdolls you before the show starts.
Yeah, it just gets me in the right.
I know where that comes from.
Stole that from the Suits and Elgard playbook. I love that. The thing, Hamilton now has 2 of these guys, which I find fascinating. The Riders have one. I mean, they would use Albert Awachi or they would use Patrick Lavoie in an H-back role, a guy in motion, maybe even the third guy to the field where Corey Watson was. Lavoie was a big guy, but he was 6'2", 240. That's a big receiver. We're now talking about a different level of big guys. Even BC with Javon Coutoy would have him that third guy to the field, and he would come back and he would hit the backside defensive end, and they would use him in the run game. Even he's 6'5", but he's still 230. Like Jake Burt at 6'3", 260 running 4.6s. When they already have a guy like Nikola Kalinic, I start to think Burt's, you take him number 1, he's going to be like a proper receiver, and he could probably do the other stuff, but they're going to run him at defensive backs who are 5'11", 190, and let's see what happens, because that's, to me, I don't think you need 2 H-backs or tight ends, but like Burt might be a receiver at that size, and I'm terrified of that.
Well, yeah, it's a couple things that you can really truck DBs. I mean, now you get that motion going, you time it up on the snap of the ball. If a DB dares to come up and try and press you, then he gets rolled over. And this is, this is what DBs start to think about. They start to say, if I've got a big receiver like this, I don't want him to get any downfield momentum. So I'm gonna get to the line of scrimmage, that yard off, and then take him on physically right there. And then they're surprised by the strength and power of these guys. And they get trucked, and that's how the guy gets open. Yeah. But think of it this way, too. You're in that downhill motion, and you're Jake Burt now, and then you start to go towards the line of scrimmage. So now the defensive end is thinking, I got a 240-pounder coming down on the crack block.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. Oh.
Or the crossing play. I mean, Rocky DiPietro was tough to play against. I mean, he's physical guy that would just try to wrestle you away. But I remember Bobby Jurison turning to me a couple times in the huddle playing against DiPietro, and he'd say, if you don't call the crack from DiPietro and he ear holes me, I'm coming after you, Suter. That was the discussion, or the halfback on that side, usually Richie Hall. So I'm bringing back some of the names from the past, but I just think there's so much you can do with a guy that's athletic, can run, can get behind coverage, but is a big, strong tight end. You got to think of him outside of the NFL prototypical tight end and think of him as a downhill motion truck that can catch the ball and is athletic.
I just had to pull up because I just wanted to see this. At 6'3", 260, Jake Burt would outweigh AC Leonard, who will start at defensive end for the Riders. And you mentioned the crack block where, yeah, you come down and then you drill the defensive end before you then leave for a route. That would be, at some point, that would be terrifying. That would be terrifying to get hit by. I didn't see him coming, and he's 260. He's bigger than most of the guys on our defense. I never even thought of that, but that's terrifying. And I would yell at you if you didn't call that out, for sure.
Well, exactly. And back then, the rules were different. So you could come from way outside the box and do that. And that was even more difficult. But, that's another area where you can use a guy like this. The other one is, of course, down on the goal line and short yardage. You can play double tight. You can double tight. And now you've got your tight ends running routes on play action. I mean, you're not building a whole receiving core with guys like this, but to have it in your lineup is, I know offensive coordinators get excited about it.
Yeah. Well, and I just start to think forward, and we don't know when LaBelle will come up here because he is signed in the NFL. But I think of a receiving core with LaBelle, who is 6'4", 250. Jordan Williams-Lambert, if he's still around, 6'3", 230. Shaq Evans is a very good-sized receiver. He probably goes, I'm guessing, 210, 215. He is built and he is strong. And then you have little Kyron Moore just whizzing around. And then, if you put Justin McInnis on the outside at 6'4", 200 pounds, like you have a lot of, if you're Jason Moss, you have a lot of different athletes to play with. And I can only imagine what Moss could come up with all of that available to him.
Yeah, and I think of it from the defensive perspective where okay, so you just mentioned those guys, and as you were talking about it, I'm thinking, okay, how would I defend them? My first thought would be I got to take away their space quickly, because you get these big players, big-bodied players, receivers going downhill, and you've got problems. But if you can stop them, now go ahead and try and jam Jake Burt at the line of scrimmage, and try and play press on him. I mean, you better. You better have a little weight in your backside to be able to do that and hang in there, or else, you're on roller skates and you're trying to throw out an anchor. But it is going to be fun to see how they use these guys. And I got to just emphasize again, though, DT, I loved his reaction. I really did. I mean, I immediately followed Jake Burt. I'm going to do the same for guys like Lacombo, and congratulations to the U of S and Scott Flory up there, producing another great athlete, and great person. Again, Jeremy O'Day saying high character guy. I love that. I think that's what separates you. I think it's underrated big time in the draft. And when we're analyzing players, we look at the measurables. I get it. But to me, the difference is from the shoulders up when you're at the highest levels. And Let's see Lacombo. I can't wait to see him play.
And Suits, before I let you go, we need these territorial picks back, because Winnipeg taking 2 kids from the Regina Rams, baloney. They should be here. Robbie Lowe's and Kyle Borsa. But Winnipeg, they know everything's better in Saskatchewan, so they take our players and they take them to Winnipeg. I don't like that.
Well, it's a
territorial.
It really is a tribute to the quality of coaching they're getting at the U Sports level, the quality of coaching in Saskatchewan, both U of R and U of S, and minor football as well, and learning the game, loving the game, respecting it, respecting what it takes to get to the highest level and to get yourself drafted. Congratulations to all those young guys, and if you haven't been drafted and you're listening, and you get a chance to get to a training camp, do that too, because rob bags of the CFL and of pro football happen all the time. So don't let the fact that you didn't get drafted deter you. Just get going, keep working at it, try and get into camp, get your foot in the door, and work your butt off.
Amen. Thank you, Suits.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks Suits.
DT.
Glenn Suter back with us on Monday. Every Monday and Thursday, fine tailored suits right here on the Sports Cage.